President Xi and I are announcing that Canada and China are forging a new strategic partnership. It will focus on 5 key areas where both our nations stand to make substantial and sustained gains. I'm very pleased to share that President Xi in our meeting today has committed to ensuring visa-free access for Canadians traveling to China. China's strengths in electric vehicle sector are undeniable. China produces some of the most affordable and efficient energy-efficient vehicles in the world. And in order for Canada to build our own competitive EV sector, we need to learn from innovative partners, access their supply chains, and increase local demand. And to help bring down costs for Canadians, Canada has agreed to allow up to 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles into the Canadian market, with the most favored nation tariff rate of 6.1%. We're reaffirming our One China policy. It remains constant, it's consistent.
这是加拿大总理马克卡尼于2026年1月16日在北京的新闻发布会上的讲话，谈及这次访华的成果。他系统性阐述了加拿大如何重新定位对华关系，议题涵盖中国电动汽车进入加拿大市场、免签与旅游往来、农业与能源合作、台湾问题、安全风险，以及在与李强总理会面中提到的新世界秩序。卡尼总理认为，全球多边体系正在发生断裂，而非渐进转型。在这一背景下，加拿大不再假设旧秩序会自动修复，而是试图通过与中国建立可控、可预测的合作框架，为自身寻找新的发展轨道。
It has been a historic and productive 2 days, during which myself and fellow ministers have had the opportunity to meet with President Xi, Premier Li, Chairman Zhao, as well as business leaders across a number of key sectors. And I am very pleased to announce that we have made significant progress in a number of key areas. Stepping back, it's been 8 years since a Canadian Prime Minister visited China. And in that time, the world has changed dramatically. The technological revolution and the energy transition are accelerating at an unprecedented pace. The global trading system is undergoing a fundamental change, and the effectiveness of multilateral institutions on which trading powers such as Canada and China have greatly relied, that effectiveness has been greatly reduced. This is happening fast, it's large, it's a rupture, it's not a transition. What we do now as Canada, how we position ourselves in the world, will shape our future for decades to come. Canada can thrive in a new system, but to do so, we must be ambitious. We must work at speed and scale to find new partners, to diversify our trade and attract unprecedented levels of investment in our country. And we must be pragmatic. Two-way trade between our countries amounts to nearly $120 billion a year. There are 400,000 careers across Canada. Farmers in the prairies, manufacturers and engineers in Ontario and Quebec, fish harvesters in Atlantic Canada and British Columbia, they are all supported by trade with China. $20 billion in wages are earned each year by Canadians because of our existing trade relationship. And this is a relationship that has been distant and uncertain for nearly a decade. That has held back investment, it's stalled business growth, and cost Canadian workers good opportunities. And it has had the consequence of leaving us even more dependent on our largest trading partner. And that's why immediately after the election, Canada's new government began to recalibrate our relationship with China, strategically, pragmatically, and decisively. Ours is a long-standing relationship. Canada was one of the first Western nations to recognize China in 1970. Over many decades, Chinese Canadians have helped build communities in every part of our country, from dynamic small businesses to schools and hospitals, straight through to innovation across advanced technologies. There are 2 million Canadians of Chinese descent, leaders across commerce, technology, and culture. Mandarin is Canada's 4th most spoken language. There is much to protect in this relationship and much on which to build and much to be gained. So leveraging our strengths and focusing on areas of alignment, Canada and China can create greater stability, security, and prosperity for both our nations. And to that end, President Xi and I are announcing that Canada and China are forging a new strategic partnership. It will focus on 5 key areas where both our nations stand to make substantial and sustained gains. The first is in clean energy and climate competitiveness, areas where Canada and China have immense strengths and complementary strengths. Second, we're expanding trade, particularly in agriculture and food, where Canada is a reliable partner. Third, our commitment to multilateralism and strengthening global governance comes at a time when all of this is in flux. Fourth, we're deepening engagement in public safety and security to protect our peoples. And finally, people-to-people ties and culture are being enhanced to enrich our lives. To begin, we're leveraging our strengths in energy, clean tech, and climate competitiveness. Canada is an energy superpower in both conventional and clean energies. We have an over 80% clean electricity grid with vast potential to power the clean economy of the future. China's strengths in electric vehicle sector are undeniable. China produces some of the most affordable and efficient energy-efficient vehicles in the world. And in order for Canada to build our own competitive EV sector, we need to learn from innovative partners, access their supply chains, and increase local demand. And to help bring down costs for Canadians, Canada has agreed to allow up to 49,000 Chinese electric vehicles into the Canadian market, with the most favored nation tariff rate of 6.1%. This is a return to the levels that existed prior to recent trade frictions. But it's a return under an agreement that promises much more for Canadians. It's expected that within 3 years, this agreement will drive considerable Chinese investment in Canada's auto sector, creating good careers in Canada and accelerating our progress towards a net zero future and the auto industry of the future. With this agreement, it's also anticipated that within 5 years, more than 50% of these vehicles will be affordable EVs with an import price of less than $35,000. Over the next 15 years, Canada intends to double our energy grid through major investments in hydro, nuclear, solar, and wind power. That creates tremendous opportunities for Chinese partnerships in these investments, including in energy storage and offshore wind. On the other hand, Canada is developing our oil and natural gas reserves, one of the world's largest, to be the lowest risk, lowest cost, and lowest carbon. Last June, we exported our first LNG shipment to Asia, and we're scaling up quickly, making major investments in streamlining approvals. By 2030, Canada will produce 50 million tons of LNG each year, all of which will be destined for Asian markets. The second pillar of our strategic partnership aims to increase trade directly between Canada and China. Our agricultural cooperation built the foundation of our bilateral relationship. For more than 6 decades, Canada has been a reliable partner for China in food exports. Canadians export more than $7 billion in agricultural products to China each year. China used to be the largest market for Canadian canola seed. We want to not just return to those levels, but to surpass them. And so I'm pleased today to announce that Canada and China have reached a preliminary but landmark trade agreement to remove trade barriers and reduce tariffs. By March the 1st, Canada expects that China will lower tariffs on Canadian canola seed to a combined rate of approximately 15%. China is a 4 billion canola seed market for Canadian producers, and this change represents a significant drop from the current combined tariff levels of 84%. Furthermore, Canada expects that Canadian canola meal, as well as Canadian lobsters, crabs, and peas, will not be subject to relevant anti-discrimination tariffs from March 1st of this year until at least the end of this year. Together, these results will unlock nearly $3 billion of export orders for Canadian farmers, fish harvesters, and processors as they realize the full potential of this market of 1.4 billion people. With this agreement, we also expect to see a resolution of many long-term obstacles for a range of important agricultural sectors from beef to pet food. We welcome Chinese business plans to significantly scale up their investment in Canada, in major clean energy projects, as well as in agriculture and consumer projects. And by building this new strategic partnership, we're creating the stability and certainty needed to catalyze new investment and opportunities for Canadian workers. Both Canada and China are strong advocates of multilateralism. China will be the host of APEC this year, and Canada stands ready to support their agenda, focused on strengthening and reinvigorating the multilateral system. Canada appreciates China's support for our bid to host the APEC's Leaders Summit in 2029. The fourth pillar of our new strategic partnership is public safety and security. And this is an area where pragmatic and constructive engagement with China is crucial. Through this pillar, our law enforcement agencies will increase cooperation to better combat narcotics trafficking, transnational crime, cybercrime, synthetic drugs, and money laundering. And we will create safer communities for people in both our countries. And finally, people have always been at the core of this relationship. As I said, Canada is home to a Chinese diaspora of 2 million. Over 300,000 Chinese visitors came to Canada in 2024. China is Canada's 7th largest source of tourism. So the fifth pillar of this partnership will build on opportunities for cultural exchanges and partnerships that further deepen our people-to-people ties. That means museums, digital content creators, visual artists, and other creative professionals in our respective countries will have new opportunities to collaborate. It also means more tourism, including following China's decision in November to grant approved destination status for group travelers to Canada. And we're building on this progress, looking to increase travel, exchange, and deepen our cultural ties. I'm very pleased to share that President Xi, in our meeting today, has committed to ensuring visa-free access for Canadians traveling to China. We're different countries. We have different systems, different histories, different perspectives. Yet, we have much in common. And when we focus on our strengths and we focus our ambition towards those areas where we have the most in common, Canada and China have done great things. In the mid-1980s, our bilateral trade was roughly $2 billion. In just 2 decades, that increased to $30 billion. Through periods of global tension and disruption, we've created more opportunities for our workers, businesses, and investors by working together. The work in the recent months, the discussions and the meetings over the past 2 days have not been a question of putting things back on track. It's been more a question of designing new tracks that will benefit the people of both our countries. In a world of increasing uncertainty, Canada is building with speed, confidence, and determination. We're forging new partnerships around the world. We're diversifying trade, over a dozen new agreements across 4 continents in recent months. We're attracting record levels of new investment in order to unleash $1 trillion of investment in the Canadian economy over the next 5 years. We're building a web of new connections with China to create transformative opportunities for Canadian workers, build more stability, more certainty, and prosperity on both sides of the Pacific. And with that, I very much look forward to your questions. Thank you very much.
How do you intend to explain it to the U.S. In allowing that entry? And separately, how do you intend to explain it to Canadian car makers who fear any softening on Chinese EVs?
Okay, so you mean the auto portion of the broader partner? Yes, okay. So I think the first thing to say is exactly that it's part of a broader partnership, and the fundamental issue is we have a broader strategic partnership on which to build and create big opportunity. But to get to the auto question and your various questions around specifically, let's put this in context. 49,000 vehicles, which is the cap on Chinese electric vehicle exports to Canada. That's part of this agreement. That's a return to levels last seen in 2023, the last full year before the Canadian tariff actions. That's the first point. Second point, again, to put it in, dimension it, that's less than 3% of the size of the Canadian auto market. The third point, to put in context, and I reference this, is that part of this agreement, and it takes a few years to build this, a couple of years to build this, that a portion, an increasing portion of those exports will be in a new segment of the Canadian market. In other words, electric vehicles that cost less than $35,000 at the at the landed price. So there's huge opportunity here to get more affordable cars in the electric vehicle market for Canada. The fourth element, and in many respects the most important element, is the beginning of discussions and expectation of Chinese investment in Canada and partnership in Canada to produce vehicles over time, so to partner with Canadian firms. And putting all this, and if I can take the last part of your question and move to colleagues, which is vis-a-vis the U.S., I think we need to look at this in the context of building. I mean, we're building a new part of our car industry, building cars of the future in partnership, bringing affordable autos for Canadians at a time when affordability is top of mind, and doing it at a scale that allows for a smooth transition in the sector.
This week, 2 Liberal MPs cut short their visit to Taiwan. It was a friendship and outreach visit. They cut it short before they were going to meet with President William Lai. They said in a statement that they were advised to do this by the government. So why did the government advise these 2 Liberal MPs to cut short their visit? And is this an indication we're willing to tailor our foreign policy to placate Beijing?
Well, a couple things. One is our policy with respect to Taiwan, our one China policy, which was set in 1970, has not changed. We're reaffirming our one China policy. It remains constant. It's consistent. We have relations with the government here, People's Republic of China, and we have people-to-people relations in Taiwan. Those MPs, members of my caucus, the members of our caucus, participated in the people-to-people proportion of that trip, but no, not in the government proportion, and that's straightforward, not causing confusion about what the policy is of the government, the policy of Canada that has been the policy of Liberal governments and the policy of Conservative governments over the course of the last 55 years.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Less than a year ago, you said that China was the biggest security threat to Canada. Do you still believe that?
The security landscape continues to change. And in a world that's more dangerous and divided, we face many threats. That's the reality. And the job, my responsibilities as Prime Minister, the job of the government, is to manage those threats. You manage those threats by building resilience, building security. You manage those threats through alliances. You manage those threats through engagement, and we're pursuing all of those. And I would say that, well, the threat environment has increased. The risks have multiplied. So too has our resilience and our engagement, which is protecting Canadians on balance.
But does that threat from
Next
China still
question?
exist?
Do you think?
I'll refer to my previous answer.
After your visit, is it fair to say that you're concluding that China is a more predictable and maybe reliable partner to Canada than the United States is today?
Well, let me answer it. I'm going to answer it directly with respect to the relations with China and our engagement with China. And I will say that from the first conversation I had with Premier Lee, telephone conversation, then the meeting in New York, the long meeting with President Xi in Korea, and then the meetings over the course of the last few days. There are a number of specific issues, and I've outlined them that where we've made progress in our strategic partnership. But we spent a fair bit of time in all of those meetings about the guardrails, if you will, of the relationship, where we felt we could cooperate, where we had differences of opinion, where we had differences of view in the system, respecting each other's differences in the system. And that sort of candid and consistent dialogue, frank dialogue, that leads to a more predictable and effective relationship. Our relationship, the one comparison I will give you with the United States, our relationship, this is no insight, is much more multifaceted, much deeper, much broader than it is with China. But yes, in terms of the way that our relationship has progressed in recent months with China. It is more predictable, and you see results coming from that.
Hello, Prime Minister Carney. CSIS has called China an enduring threat to Canadian tech and democracy, and some in the auto sector have said that Chinese EVs could pose a national security risk if allowed into Canada. And your plan is to increase the number of those EVs that are coming into Canada every year. Did you get any assurances from President Xi that China would stay out of elections, for example, and sensitive sectors before allowing more Chinese investment in many sectors, including the auto sector?
So several aspects. Thank you for the question. Several aspects of what you said. The first is, and I'm going to refer to something I said a few minutes ago, which is we're returning to the levels of Chinese automobiles as a cap that we had 2 years ago. Okay. Secondly, just to reinforce, that's less than 3% of the Canadian auto sector. So again, let's keep that keep it in perspective.
But that's going up by 6.5% every year after.
Yeah. But you bring that, you compound that growth, and you're getting to about 70,000 vehicles at year 5, although the agreement has it reviewed after year 3. So again, it's still in low single-digit proportion of the size of the Canadian auto sector. Canadians buy about 1.8 million autos a year, just to put it in context. The second thing, but you asked, you had autos mentioned, but then you asked, if I may, a deeper question around our relations, and as you said, foreign interference, transnational aspects. The first thing I'd say is that part of the agreement includes a security aspect, a greater cooperation between law enforcement on a series of cross-border crime issues. That's the kind of progress we need in order to address a range of issues, including illicit narcotics, but as well as interference. And then the second is that we have an understanding. These are some of the issues that we discuss in terms of our expectations in Canada, our red lines in terms of preventing foreign interference, not tolerating foreign interference, and addressing it when we see it. And as Prime Minister, I've always taken this extremely seriously, just from the point when I got my security clearance well before I was elected leader of the Liberal Party. Thank you.
Yesterday, when you met with Premier Lee, one of the things you said in the public remarks was this partnership with Canada and China, this new partnership, sets us up well for the new world order. What did you mean by that? What is the new world order?
Well, it's a great question, Brian, because I think the world is still determining what that order is going to be. And let's be clear what we're talking about first and foremost, which is what is going to govern global trade? What is the role of the WTO going to be? How important are bilateral deals such as the one we're developing, plurilateral deals, if I can use that term, Trans-Pacific Partnership, potential linkages between Trans-Pacific Partnership and the EU? Where is financial regulation, payment system regulation going to fit into that? All of these aspects, I mean, use a fancy word, like the architecture, the multilateral system that has been developing these is being eroded, to use a polite term, undercut, use another term. So the question is, what gets built in that place? How much of a patchwork is it? How much is it just on a bilateral basis? Or where do like-minded countries in certain areas? So like-minded countries, just to be clear, doesn't mean you agree on everything. Aspects, for example, on digital trade or agricultural trade, climate finance as another area, to move into areas of geostrategy, geosecurity. You will have different coalitions that are formed. So what this partnership does is in areas, for example, of clean energy, conventional energy, agriculture, as we were just talking about, and financial services, which we've talked less about, but the evolution of the global financial system, the role of the renminbi over time, the evolution of cross-border payments. I know it all sounds very dry, except for your organization, which I think takes an interest in it. These are important elements of how the system is going to work. And look, the expectation is that rather than these being developed necessarily through the IMF, WTO, and other multilateral organizations, it is going to be coalitions that develop them, not for the world, but for subsectors of the world.